In this video, I'll show you how to laser engrave this patch using my Glowforge and adhere it using a hat press. Hey everyone, it's Karley Hall and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name's Karley and I love all things crafting. If you love crafts too, make sure to head over to my channel, check out the other videos, and subscribe. In this video, I'm going to show you how to laser engrave these pre-cut patches. They have adhesive on the back already. That just needs to be heat activated. So we're going to use a heat press and apply it to our hat. So I've already done one here so you can see. I've laser engraved it. I'll share my settings. I'll show you how to set up the document. We'll even create a jig so that you can redo these settings and create multiple patches. And I'll show you everything you need to know. So let's get started. I'll start by setting up my document. In this tutorial, I will be using Adobe Illustrator, but you can use whatever design program you feel most comfortable with. And I'm going to set up my jig. So I have a document set up now, but I'm actually going to measure my cardboard. It won't be exact because part of it will be cut off where I place it into the Glowforge, but I have some markings on this piece of cardboard. This is just an old Amazon box, and I wrote in the bottom left-hand corner, this will be my hat patch jig. And the bottom right corner will be, looks like fight, but tight against that bottom right, which I will show you what that means when I place it into my Glowforge. So this piece of cardstock is 14 inches long by 5 inches tall. So that will kind of give us a rough estimation of how much space we actually have. So 14 by 5, I said. So we'll set up our artboard by clicking on the artboard icon. And then we'll type in 14 inches by 5 inches tall. All right, our patches are a whole bunch of different sizes. We are using the rectangle today, but you can do this for all of the shapes. So this is 2 inches by 3 inches. And I like to make my jig a little bit bigger than my actual patch. So that way I have a little bit of wiggle room. So I'm going to click on the shape icon here. If you right click on it, you'll get all the options. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool. You can also hit M on your keyboard. And then if you single click on your artboard, you can type out the exact dimensions you want. So I said it was 3 by 2, but I'm going to do 3.1 by 2.1. That will give me a rectangle. In order to tell your Glowforge that you want it to cut and not engrave, if you don't use a fill, it will automatically come in as a cut instead of an engrave. So I'm just going to switch those so that it's just the outline. So this will be my outline, and you can add as many of these rectangles as you want. So I'm going to spread them out a little bit, but you can use a piece of cardboard as big or as small as you want. This is just an example. And you can make it as organized or chaotic as you want. So we have our jig all set up, but now I want to know where to place my actual design. And if you look at this patch, I have a stitch around the edge that's about 1/8 of an inch from the edges. So to give us a visual representation of that, I'm going to grab another rectangle and we're going to make this 3 by 2, the size of the patch. And then I'm going to click Object, Path, and Offset Path. And we want it to preview, and I want it to be a -1/8 of an inch inside. Following? So this is going negative and it's adding this stroke here. And that will be a representation of where my stitches are. Okay, so now I have a good idea. I don't need this one. This was my first example. So this is my stitch line and this is my actual patch size. So if I were to bring this in over here, you can see that my patch and my stitch line go inside that. So that is what we're looking at. And then I would just want to make sure that I can fit whatever artwork inside that area. So you can see that my art will fit if I center it up in there. The only reason I added that stitch line is because if I were to make my art too big, like this, it looks like it'll fit on the patch, but it actually would get cut off by the stitches. So you just want to be aware of that stitch line so you can give yourself a reference point and then resize your image and just leave this off your artboard or hide it when you bring it into the Glowforge software. So you can resize that to be as big or as small as you'd like. You can see here that I have it pretty large and it's just centered between the stitch lines. So once you're happy with your design, what you're going to do is you're going to place it into your jig. And this will allow us to center everything up. So I can do this by centering individually. I'm only using one today, but I will cut my whole jig. So just center them up however you'd like. I'm just going to select them and center them up. Okay, so I'm only making one patch today, but if you're making multiple patches, you could put all the artwork into the different patches or just make copies and place them where you need them to go. So I'm happy with this. I'm going to leave my patch off to the side and I'm going to actually recolor it so I know exactly what that is. So let's just make it a brown color and fill that in so you know that's your patch reference. Let's save this document. Click File, Save. I'm going to save this onto my computer and just name it whatever you want. I'm saving it as an SVG right here, and then click Use Artboard because I don't want that other patch to be in my final upload. So I'm going to click Use Artboard and then click Save. These settings are great. SVG 1.1, type SVG, subsetting none, and image location embed if you had any images. Okay, now I'm going to import that into my Glowforge software. So I'm going to click Create New Design, upload a file, and choose that file. So here we are in the Glowforge software. I'm going to rename this as Hat Patch Jig so that I know what this is. And I am going to place my Hat Patch Jig cardboard into the software so you can see it. So in the Glowforge, I have this pushed all the way up against the front so that when I go to use it next time, I know that it will be in the exact same spot. So it's pushed against this crumb tray and the bottom right. So my software has refreshed and you can hear the Glowforge humming in the background. Now I can grab everything and move it onto my jig. So I just want to give myself enough room where I'm not hitting my pins and I'm not out of bounds. So that looks good. I know working on the edge is sometimes frowned upon, but for me, being able to use the jig and push it into the corner and have it in the same spot every single time, so I don't need to cut a new jig, is more valuable than having it in the center. Of course, you can cut a new jig every single time, but if you want to save it, this is the way that I do it to ensure that I have it in the correct placement when I go to use this file again. So to cut our jig, I'm going to click on this unknown material and we're going to use corrugated cardboard. And I'm going to click Ignore on my Engrave. So in this first action, we're just going to cut out the jig. So I'm cutting out 3 rectangles so I know where to place my hat patches. So we're going to click Print. And this will only take 18 seconds. So let's start up the Glowforge and get that cut. Okay, my jig is cut. You can see the same jig, and I'm just going to grab a little knife and pop these babies out. I did that one-handed and you can see that my jig moved, but it's not a big deal because I know exactly where this goes since I pushed it into the bottom right corner. So it's back in place, and now I can place my patch into my jig. Okay, so I have my patch. I'm going to add some rolled masking on the back. This is optional, but if you're worried about it blowing away, rolled masking tape will hold it down great. So I'm just going to stick it on. I'm not using any type of masking on the front, and this is leatherette that is laser safe. So in the listing, it says that it's specifically made to be engraved. So back at the laser, I'm just going to place this into my jig. So you can see I gave myself a little bit of wiggle room with the 0.1, but it fits pretty snug. And if I had other patches, I'd put them in here. So now that I have cut my cardboard, I can ignore this layer. And I'm going to change my setting to thin natural leather. And we're going to engrave that on the HD graphic settings. And I'm just going to drop it down to 225 lines per inch. There were so many recommended settings for what to engrave, and I found this the easiest because it's closest to those thin natural leather settings, but it ran from speed of 900 to 1000 to power 4, and so speed of 300, you could probably increase the speed, but I liked the dark image that it gave me, but it will take a little bit more time. So if you want it to go faster, you can increase the speed and try some test settings. But for my patches that I will link in the video description, the speed of 300, power 6, and lines per inch, 225 worked great for me. So again, we have those turned on and we're ignoring this. If you had multiple patches, you would want to have all of them set up the same. And one big piece of advice, if I look here, you can see that where the cut was, it does not line up to what you see on screen. Do not move anything. Do not be tempted to move anything. Keep everything in the exact same spot and click print. You can see that after it autofocused, it got a little bit closer to where it was. So it's not completely off, but it is still off. And this patch will take 7 minutes and 51 seconds. So not the fastest process. So if you want to adjust those settings to be a little bit faster, you can toy around with them. But like I said, these worked great for me. So I'm going to click print and get started. I've got my Glowforge venting out my window, and I'm going to click the magic button. While the Glowforge is still going, I can see it from where I'm standing. Don't walk away from your Glowforge if you can't see it, but I can still see it from where I am. I'm going to power on my hat press. So I'm just going to power it on, and I'm going to set it at 285 for 20 seconds. 285 for 20 seconds, and that's in Fahrenheit. So we'll set that up and let that heat up. Here's what it looks like right after it's done. So I'm going to pull it out and show you how to attach it. So here's my jig, and I can use this again with that same document and just line up my jig in the bottom right corner tight against the crumb tray in the bottom of the machine. And then I would just line up my artwork to be centered on those rectangles. So I can save this and put it with my other Glowforge stuff. And then here's what my patch looks like. So the tape on the back, I just wanted to show you that it doesn't do any damage to the adhesive. The threads were a little bit long, so I'm going to trim those down before I attach it, and then we'll get going. Here's the hat I'm going to attach it to. Since I'm not selling these, I'm going to chop off the tag, but if you're selling it, you can leave on tags or put your own tags on. And to prep my hat, I'm just going to do a little bit of lint rolling to make sure that there's no debris underneath where I'm attaching it to. Okay, there's still a little bit of a crease right here, so I'm going to add a pressing pillow, a Teflon pressing pillow into this, since it's not a hard hat. So I'm just going to place that at the edge of my press and then put my hat over that so that it hopefully has a little bit more to press into. Let's see if that will do what it needs to do here. It's a little bit better, but I just really don't want any big creases since I want the adhesive to lay flat onto all the seams. So you want to make sure to get as many crease lines out as possible. And then I'm going to press it onto the hat. So to secure it onto the hat, I did use heat resistant tape onto this one. And you can kind of see where the lines, there's a few pressing lines, and it's a little glossier where the tape wasn't. So just keep that in mind. If you're using tape, it might add a few pressing lines across your logo, but to make sure that it's straight, I needed to use tape. So I'm going to use tape to kind of pin it into place while I'm pressing. And since I told you I did have a few press lines, I'm going to cover the whole thing in heat resistant tape so that at least it's even. I might get one press line across where the seam of the tape is, but we will see. So we have our Teflon pillow, our hat, the leather, and then a Teflon sheet over the top like this, so that when I swing it over, hopefully it doesn't all move on me. Okay, so I have it lined up, and I'm going to press it all down for 20 seconds. And here's how it looks right out of the press, and I'll let that cool. So once it's cool to the touch, I'm going to peel off my heat-resistant tape. And covering the entire leather patch was definitely the way to go because I don't have any varying colors in the leather patch. Here's what it looks like on the inside. And then on the patch itself, it's secured really well for an adhesive patch. It doesn't feel like it affects the soft cap, so I feel like it bends pretty well with the hat. It doesn't feel like it's going to mess with the structure of the hat. I did have that one little wrinkle that I didn't get perfectly flat, and you can see it on the back. So on these unstructured hats, you just want to be mindful of that. So I could have done a better job there. But on the structured hat, it was way easier to press since this has a pretty rigid structure. So I didn't use a Teflon pillow for this, and I'd say this was way easier to position than the unstructured hat, where I definitely had to do a little bit of finagling to get that pressing pillow under so I could press it. And it's not terrible, but I could have done better. So if you're trying to press structured hats as a beginner, probably a better choice. And the unstructured was a little more difficult, but I still think that the results turned out great. So I will link to the hats that I used, I will link to the patches that I used, and anything else in the video description. If you have questions, make sure to leave those in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.